At the conclusion of a psychological attack, the victim's internal architecture dissolves. They are left hollow, sitting in the wreckage of an identity they no longer recognize, unable to locate the instincts they once used to navigate the world. This presents a unique forensic problem. We have to ask how a human mind can be systematically burned to the ground without a single act of physical violence. The mechanism behind this destruction is a clinical phenomenon known as identity mimicry. It operates as a highly sophisticated form of cognitive hacking. Unlike a standard assault, this specific infiltration begins without overt threats or noticeable red flags. The breach is initiated through a perfectly constructed illusion of absolute safety. Total psychological destruction is only achieved when the predator successfully tricks the target into voluntarily dismantling their own mental defenses. To understand how those defenses fall, we have to rewind the timeline to the very beginning. It starts with an intoxicating encounter, meeting someone who feels like a preordained soulmate, the person who understands the darkest corners of your past without you ever saying a word. This feeling of divine, effortless intervention is the result of calculated reconnaissance and targeted psychological exploitation. For months, the manipulator quietly studies their target. They observe unspoken traumas and core insecurities, mapping out precise access points of your psyche. With that data, the predator engineers a disguise. They perfectly mirror those vulnerabilities back to you, simulating profound, unearned emotional understanding. The euphoric feeling of having found the one is a manufactured response. You aren't looking at a soulmate. You are looking at your own weaponized reflection, crafted by someone else to lead you into a cage. Once the initial connection is established, the setup moves into clinical execution. The manipulator begins infiltrating the microscopic habits and values of your daily life. It starts small, a shared preference here, a deeply held belief there. They are actively exploiting a specific cognitive flaw, familiarity bias. To trigger this bias, the tactics are microscopic. When they speak, they meticulously calibrate their vocal frequency. They adopt your exact cadence. When they laugh, they hit your specific pitch. The human brain is wired to trust the familiar. When continuously exposed to patterns that perfectly match its own, the neurological response is immediate. The brain automatically lowers its natural threat detection firewalls. The infiltration crosses a critical threshold when the predator fully adopts your deepest moral values. By perfectly replicating your internal architecture, the external threat becomes completely indistinguishable from your own internal voice. Your psychological boundaries are never breached by force. They are willingly deactivated because you've let the predator walk in wearing your own psychological skin. Safely inside the defenses, the timeline advances to the surgical execution phase. The nature of the hack shifts entirely from mirroring to active distortion. The primary tactic becomes the slow, methodical introduction of microscopic lies. These lies are specifically engineered to contradict your baseline reality and your most reliable memories. This creates intense psychological friction, a state of cognitive dissonance where your own physical senses conflict directly with the manipulator's claims. Because the manipulator has successfully mapped themselves to your core identity, a trap is sprung. When forced to choose, the victim consistently chooses to distrust their own memory rather than distrust the manipulator. The ultimate objective of this dissonance is the creation of a reality vacuum. The manipulator isolates you until you have no independent truth left to rely on, except the version they provide. This marks the darkest milestone of the execution. You begin to feel like you are losing your mind, eventually begging your abuser to save you from the very chaos they orchestrated. Bringing the timeline back to the present, the operation eventually concludes. The manipulator secures what they need, and the illusion drops entirely. The abandonment phase arrives violently and without warning. The deeply mirrored identity you relied upon simply vanishes overnight. This specific emptiness stems from a total loss of internal orientation. You look for yourself, but you cannot find the person you were before they arrived. It is the literal theft of your baseline self. The manipulator exits the dynamic entirely unharmed, carrying a freshly harvested identity to use on their next target. You are left paralyzed, sitting in wreckage that feels entirely foreign. This is the aftermath of a successful cognitive heist. This process targets the victim's psychological operating system, overriding the fundamental structures of the mind. Understanding the mechanics of this destruction provides the exact protocol required to survive and defend against future infiltrations. You must step back and become a clinical, hyper-vigilant observer of your own life and relationships. Execute a continuous reality audit. Actively question extreme coincidences. Interrogate the highly suspicious, rapid alignment of deep personal values when you meet someone new. The clinical warning is absolute. The exact moment a person feels like a flawless, frictionless reflection of your own soul is the exact moment you need to run. Maintain ruthless ownership of your own mind, your senses, and your reality. If you want to keep your mind your own, watch the next one. Otherwise, you're just a pawn.